I was watching a video the other day, yesterday, and it's like any other a lot of videos that scroll across your feed, but this one was just a very short collage, kind of like just a 2-minute video. Uh, I don't really follow much television, but I guess, it was one of these reality shows where they put people, in these situations. So in this one, they took, it looked like maybe 10 women, presuming from, variety of backgrounds, all of them pretty much like between ages 22 and 28, right? They're in their 20s. They took an equal amount of men, same situation, different backgrounds. And what they did, and it turned out as you would expect, they put the group of women, again, about a dozen or so, on one small island, very small. And then they put the men on a different island. And they told them, okay, you've got, I think it's like 3 weeks. You need to adapt and learn how to survive on this island. Now, the island had what they needed. It had, there was food, but you had to catch it. There was fish, there was pigs, there was water available. Now, of course, they still had to boil the water, but there was water. It just wasn't like a natural spring. So I thought, oh, this is a cool experiment. So each one of them, they take them in a little boat, and right off the bat, they don't take the little boat to the shore. They take them about, maybe it's 30, 40 feet from the shore, and they're like, get out. Now, when they got out, the water wasn't that deep. They could touch bottom. But right off the bat, each group gets off the boat. So you see the women, and they all knew, they signed up for this. They all knew this is what they were going to do. And they couldn't bring a bunch of stuff. But part of the challenge was there was a chest, not a treasure chest, but a chest on each island with identical items. And it didn't show everything that was in the chest, but it was some basic things. There was like some containers, like to hold water. There was just a variety of things. Let's just say 10 items. Not a whole lot, but things that you could find useful if you're going to try and survive on an island. So anyways, the chest was already there on the shore, and there was no one else on this little small island. And they tell the women, okay, get out. So here they are. They knew this day was coming, and yet they didn't dress appropriately. It was just kind of weird. It was like another day at the mall kind of thing. Well, anyways, not all of it, but the other ones, they were like in tennis shoes and yoga pants, whatever. So all these women are like, the water's wet, and they get to the shore and they start going through the box and opening stuff. So then they got the guys, they show the video of them, and they're like, okay, now your time starts. Get on the island. And these guys are like jumping off the boat and having a really good time already. And they're like, yeehaw. And they just jump it in the water. They go over to the chest. And immediately there was a ranking system. You can call it the whole alpha male thing. And so like one or two guys immediately starts giving directions and saying, okay, let's see what's in the box. Let's organize it. Let's look at what we got to work with. And so they're doing that. And then it's like it jump clips to like a day or evening later. And so with the women, they're already complaining, and there is no hierarchy. They're processing it more as an emotion, and they're like, oh my gosh, and this is uncomfortable, and this is scary, and what are we going to do? And what are we going to eat, and how are we going to cook our food, and where are we going to sleep? Just a lot of questions with not a whole lot of answers. So they jump clip to the women. They're all just bitching and whining and whatever. One or two of them look like they were trying to get something done, but it wasn't really much of a group effort. And nothing got done, really. So skip forward like 24 hours or so, and the women, they still haven't even figured out their first fires. They're like, oh, God, we can't cook anything. We can't boil the water. We have containers here, but we can't boil the water. Can't anybody figure out how to make fire? Now, meanwhile, the guys, there were these things, I believe they're called caimans. Kind of looks like an alligator or a crocodile, but it's smaller and faster. So the guys, they organized, and they were like, okay, you three guys, you're going to work as a team. Your one function, find us some food, a steady food source. So these three guys go out there. And they come across these caimans, these crocodile-looking things, and they're all like, "Oh, that's dinner." Now we just got to figure out how we're going to catch these things without getting bit. So these guys are working on that. Next thing you know, it's on a rotisserie. These guys built with some rocks and some sticks and whatever, and they got a rotisserie going, and they got a stack of these caimans, and it's like Monday Night Football barbecue for them. They're all shucking and jiving and cooking this meat and eating it, and they got a fire going. And then they skip over again, the montage, time lapse. You go back to the women. They went over 14 days and still never got a fire going. And they were just getting more tired. They weren't really figuring out the food situation. They weren't catching fish. They weren't gathering up, edible coconuts. They weren't setting up a base. They weren't doing any of the things necessary to survive. And they were actually just going hungry. They were fasting. And then as time went on, they had cameras, those trail cameras planted on the trees and stuff. But there was no camera crew, eating sandwiches. It was just these cameras that were set up for this whole challenge. And so it got to the point where the thing ended and the women never pulled it together. They let it go as long as it could safely go. Of course, I'm sure they had nutritionists and doctors and whatever watching and going, okay, now they're at the point where they're going to start burning up their protein and whatever. Because at first, the body will live off of your fat. You could go 30 days without eating. You just need to drink water. So basically, it was an utter and total massive failure on Female Island. They didn't get together shelter. They didn't get together food. But as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, well, it's no surprise. Because, again, back to the men, soon as the men hit the beach, they started getting organized. They didn't get all emotional like the women were doing. It's hot, and what are we going to do? They're processing their situation from an emotional perspective, the whole experience, which is what you would expect. That's not anything new. Everybody knows, history has proven, women come from a very emotional place. Whereas the men, they went at this from a logical, rational position. It was like, I don't care how I feel about this. Let's make this happen. What do we got to do? Okay, number one, let's evaluate our resources. How soon do we need water? Okay, let's work out some shelter. Let's see what food sources are here. And they just made it happen. Again, and then the men there, they developed an hierarchy. So you had like one or two alpha males, maybe three, who were like giving decision, kind of, if you want to think about like a corporate structure, you got, different managers handling different divisions. It's like, okay, you guys focus on this and you guys on that and then this. And once though their bases were covered, like in the first 24 hours, well, now it's just a vacation. Now they're just going for swims and taking naps and hunting food and eating. And they went the whole like 3 weeks, a little crusty and dirty. I mean, I imagine they swam in the ocean, but probably didn't shave. But other than that, they had a great time. Darkened up their tan, whatever. So the reason I mention that is because afterwards, I was just sitting there. How sometimes you'll just shut off a video, you turn your chair and you just kind of ponder. It's like, wow, that was a lot of good information. It's like we all knew it would kind of go this way. And then I kind of like attached it. I started, I don't know how about you, but this is how I memorize things. It's associative memory. And so you start attaching new information to old information that's related. I did that even before high school and junior high. It's just how you can memorize a lot of stuff. Your brain's arranged to work that way. So anyways, I started thinking, okay, this whole video, it has a tangency point with the women who nowadays say, I don't need no man. Men are toxic. The world would be better off without men. I'd rather live in the woods and face a bear than a man because men are just so toxic. That's the BS that's going around. And yet you ask these women who believe this, okay, what have been your contributions in history to the advancement of society, especially when it comes to technology? Now, yes, you're going to have a sprinkling of women. Madame Curie, for one, her and her husband together, they studied radiation. And by the time they figured it out, they both died of radiation poisoning, cancer, I believe. So we got Madame Curie. Who else do we got? Marie Antoinette? Yeah, that didn't end too well. Cleopatra? Okay. But that was more of a kind of nepotism. She got involved with Mark Antony, and then that turned into a big piece of negative history. Really, there's not a long list of women that we could point at and say, this woman changed the course of history for the better. But now, if you say, okay, now give me a list of men who changed history for the better. Oh, man. It's like, where do you start? You could go back to the 1800s steam locomotive. You could go to the discovery and harnessing of electricity. You could go to just about every modern convenience that we enjoy today. I won't say all, but I will say it's at least 95%. Everything from cell phones to digital camera. And not that there weren't women on the engineering teams. I'm sure there were. But the spark, the development, the initial discovery and pursuit, automobiles, Henry Ford. Okay, again, harnessing of electricity, well, sort of began with Benjamin Franklin, but really with Edison is when it became really a daily use. I mean, you could just go on and on and on and on and on down the line. And don't think that I'm here to bash women, okay? I'm simply pointing out the difference. And we cannot deny there's a difference between men and women. And it's inherent. It's wired in there. And approaching a challenge for women through an emotional lens versus men approaching it as a logical, practical puzzle to be solved, that is by and large just how men and women are. Now, you'll find some men that are effeminate and illogical. There's always going to be those outliers. And you'll find some women who are problem solvers. I haven't really met a whole lot of those, but I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But by and large, this is just how different men and women are. And it's not like good and bad, And then you toss in the menstrual cycle. So her hormones, think of it, I always think of it like a bowl of water. Every 30 days, that bowl of water gets smacked. And there's a ripple. When I was dating, and if I got into a relationship with a woman, and this is like since my mid-30s, if I got into a relationship with a woman and now I'm just dating her and it's getting pretty serious, one of the things I would do is I would take note. Usually you can find out when their menstrual cycle starts. And I would put it on the calendar, my Google Calendar. And it would remind me like 3 days in advance, her period's coming up. And I noticed there was one of two types of women when it comes to their cycle, their monthly cycle. There's the women that when their cycle starts, they are ultra sensitive, ultra emotional. The littlest thing that you didn't even mean it in a bad way, they're offended, they're hurt, they're crying. Oh, you didn't kiss me before you went out the door. And they start bawling or whatever. It's like there's those women. And then there's the women that every 30 days, they're just bitchy. There is no making them happy. They will criticize everything you do. Everything is wrong. The world is dark. They're upset. They're angry. They're lashing out. So I figured out I would much rather be with the woman that's emotional and prone to crying and whatever. I'll deal with that all day long. I'll give her hugs and I'll bring her flowers and I'll make her favorite cocoa or whatever it is. You learn how to sort of like bring their spirits up, because that's a whole lot easier to do than calming down some woman that turns into a shrew every 30 days. Because I had some of those and I would tell them, hey, look, I know it's that time. What? You think? I'm like, look, it's your time. It's your time of the month. I mean, that becomes an argument. And then, good luck telling a woman like this, just calm down. Well, that's like pouring gasoline on the fire. It's like, I am calm. I would much rather be with the woman that's just emotional sack. So I guess what I'm really saying, and there's so much more I could talk about on this, but really, it's nothing new under the sun. We all know men and women are different. And for many of us expats that are coming to live in the Philippines or Thailand or Vietnam, anywhere, Russia, any place, Colombia, it's good sometimes to just remember these differences, because you're not just dealing with a difference in gender. On top of that, her menstrual cycle, on top of even that, is her cultural upbringing. In her culture, this is offensive. In your culture, it's not even a data point. It's nothing. So I guess what I'm saying is just be on your guard. Just be alert. And this is why for years, what I have said on my channel is take things slowly. Get to know her over a year. Spend a year with her in person. All the in-video stuff, I've said it a million times, does not count. That's not relationship. That's information. That's video pen pal. You have no clue what she's doing after she logs off. And anytime the two of you do have a little spat on the video camera, it's like, well, I got to go cook. Goodbye. And in a real relationship, when you're really with each other in the same room, you have to start developing problem resolution, smoothing out your disagreements together so it's effective and quick and all that. But you can't do that on video when all they do is just switch you off. So spend a year with them in person. Get to know the real them. Learn how to resolve problems with them in an efficient way. My wife and I, we've got it down to about 8 minutes. We don't fight. That's another thing. We don't fight. We don't insult each other. We don't tear each other down. That's a fight. A fight is when you want to hurt somebody. You want to hurt them emotionally or you want to hurt them physically. That's a fight. Now, a disagreement is they want to do A and you want to do B, and now you got to figure out either a compromise or we're doing A because it makes more sense. We're doing B because it's maybe more efficient. But, you got to resolve those differences of opinion. Another factor, as if all this isn't enough, and again, it behooves you to take your relationship slowly before you make any commitments. And do not start making babies just because everything's been going good for 6 months. Jeez, don't do that. You basically made the commitment at that point. So another thing to really keep in mind with all of this, because I really see relationships in a much more serious way than I did in my younger years. Back then, I just kind of thought, oh, well, men and women been getting together for years and I'll figure this out. Well, there's a lot to figure out. It's like Pandora's box. It's just like, you think you've got whatever to deal with, and then you open the box and it multiplies. There's a massive number of things to deal with. So the idea of rushing into a relationship and commitment, man, that's like putting on a blindfold and running across the freeway. It's just not a smart idea. You have no idea what's coming. Getting into a relationship with a woman is kind of like moving to another country. You've never been here before. You don't know the level of her craziness, her wackiness. If she's a good woman, you don't know just really how faithful, loyal, loving she can be. Because maybe the other ones you dated before weren't so hot. They were nothing but problems. And, you don't want to immediately disregard a new good woman and toss her to the side just because she did one little thing that reminded you of a bad previous woman. It takes time. I often talk about look at their character. Well, what is that? That is consistency of behavior over time. That is character. That tells you whether they have a good character or a bad character. What do they consistently do over a long period of time? A woman or a man who is constantly disrespectful to other people, who looks down on the waitress or the waiter or the janitor, if they're constantly belittling those people, that person is not going to have a place in my life. If they can't respect everybody, irregardless of their station in life, if they can't give that kind of respect to other people, they got no place in my life. But men need to observe all this. Getting back into the differences between men and women. It's been something of a monstrosity, a mutation of women nowadays that instead of looking as they get into their, whatever you want to call it, like let's just say after they're 18, the old-fashioned kind of women that we prefer are the women who for ages, once they turned 18, they were looking for stability. They were looking for security in a man. And so they would exercise their choice of who to date or who to be in a relationship with based on, oh, well, does he have a future? You see it in the old movies. The young woman living with her parents in 1940s says, oh, I met a man and I want to invite him to dinner. Can we do that? And then the father, usually the first thing out of his mouth is like, well, what does he do for a living? It was all about women choosing a man for security, which is not a bad thing. But then it got mutated into what it is now, where the women have essentially done a perverse twist on that natural consideration and said, well, how incredibly wealthy is he? Does he make 7 figures? Does he own his own house? Does he have 2 Ferraris? Because she's looking to absorb all that through marriage, divorce him, and take half. See, that's the perversion of a normal motivation to seek for security. That's just flat out greed. And it's pretty sickening, and it's had a horrible result on society. And meanwhile, men have, you look back at 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, the general entertainment for men, and we're talking about what's on TV or even before TV, just what's available at the live theater, whatever, it was all highly conservative. But starting with Elvis, moving forward, it's gotten pretty radical. It was a radical thing when Barbara Eden, who played in I Dream of Jeannie, the American network censors, when they first saw the outfit she was going to wear as the genie, they were aghast. They were like, oh, no, you cannot use that costume. The producers were like, why not? And they said, you can see her belly button. And so she's wearing like an outfit, the genie outfit, and it covers up her belly button. So that's how conservative things were at one point. But then you go forward, looking at the kind of media that's available to the average man or teenage boy. I know this is laughable now, but back in the day when I was younger, the sitcom Three's Company, that was like groundbreaking entertainment. It was like, what? The guy's pretending to be gay and he's living with 2 hot women, but he's really not gay and he's struggling with living with, it's like, man, are we ready for that? And now that's tame. Now, today, they say that the average teenager boy, before he even graduates high school, has seen more beautiful nude women than kings ever saw back in the day. And so, in fact, before he's even had sex, he's already seen massive amounts of porn. Oh, and then beyond even that, you've got these teachers, these women today, who have got it in their head that they're going to start getting intimately involved with their students who are only like 15 years, 16 years old, sometimes multiple kids at the same time. I mean, so you can see how nowadays men are literally bombarded, and I'm not making this as an excuse, I'm just giving a reason, that now that just growing up and living in this world we live in, you could be watching a commercial on TV about suntan lotion, and there's got to be women wearing the smallest bikini possible. It doesn't matter what's being sold, there's got to be a sexy woman in it. And then just everything that's out there now, it's no wonder that men are every single day, if you probably start keeping track of it, it's like every day your erotic senses are being excited probably 20, 40 times a day, maybe more, depending on how much TV you watch and whatever. And so these same men who are bombarded with this every day, they get on a plane, they move to another country, and they have now, this is what I have seen for years, stray from the objective. And I'll wrap it up this way. Their objective in going to this other island should have been figure out your resources, figure out the geography, figure out how to meet your needs for shelter, water, clean, good food. Instead of him moving to another country and focusing on that, he moves to another country. Yeah, he'll get an apartment, but his main focus every time he walks out the door or even gets away from his computer is hunting down a woman for all of the physical attention that he didn't get back in his home country. He is basically sexually starved. And that has become his primary agenda. And all the guys I've seen and talked to and met with and had coffee with and breakfast, lunch, and dinner with, all the guys over the last 13 years that I have talked to who made women their primary objective, these guys today and for years that get off the plane in a foreign land, instead of focusing on the priorities to survival and comfort, instead they're on the dating apps, which I have said again, just stay off the dating apps. They start dating indiscriminately, no real reference to her character, rushing into marriage, going out there firing live rounds with women who don't want you to wear a condom. Well, big surprise, there's a baby. Where do you think babies come from? What do you think's going to happen if you're doing this with some young, fertile 20-year-old? Of course she's going to have a baby. So men are more focused on their pleasure nowadays when they go to move abroad than they are on the sound basics that will keep them out of trouble. And I probably will continue the rest of my life, I don't know, just continually advising men, set your priorities right. If when you get to another country, I've said this again for years, that first year, don't lend out a lot of money. Don't make any commitments about marriage. Don't even get engaged that first year. Don't go making any babies. Those 3 things, do not do those your first year. Your first year, yeah, go on dates, have some fun, but don't make any commitments. Don't make any babies. That first year should be dedicated to you absorbing all the information that's going to be useful for your survival, from the culture to where do you find clean water? What foods do you eat? What foods do you not eat? What parts of town do you stay out of? Where can you find your favorite comfort food? But you should be on a scouting, navigational sort of information gathering mission your very first year. That whole first year. Now, after a year of focusing on this, and like I said, yeah, go on some dates, have some fun. But after that year, now you're going to approach your decisions a lot different. Now you will have probably crossed paths with 20, 30, 40 other expats who did not wait, who did not take things slow. And now you've seen what happens to those guys. They're the ones that they're slumped over on a bar stool and you're there having some dinner, and then they come over and, hey, you're American. Hey, can we talk? Whatever. And then they spill out their whole story about how their life is a mess because they made women their first priority. And like I mentioned in the difference between the challenge of living on an island, I think one thing you can get from that, aside from many other lessons, is don't make a woman your foundation in life. You're building on sand. You need to have a plan that makes sense and then add a woman to it. But if your whole goal is answering the question for yourself, how can I make this woman happy so that I get to touch her and stuff? Oh man, you're just heading for disaster. A woman should not be the foundation of your decisions. It's a horrible idea. You as a man need to make a plan for your survival and for you to thrive and have a great time. And then secondary should be the idea of allowing the right woman to come into your life who is not going to create a bunch of chaos. She will be a woman that you've observed her character. She's a woman that can be, for the most part, peacefully lived with. She's not going to disturb your peace. She's going to help you protect it. So just some things to think about, resetting of priorities and the huge difference there is between men and women.